Welcome to episode number 1 of AI Goes to College. This podcast is the companion to the AI Goes to College newsletter, which is available at aigoestocollege.com. I'm your host, Dr. Craig Van Slyke. The podcast and newsletter help higher ed professionals navigate the world of generative AI and the changes that it's going to bring. You can subscribe at aigoestocollege.com. Just fill out the form and you'll be subscribed. Or if you prefer Substack, go to aigoestocollege.com/newsletter. Today's topics are: should you trust AI? Consensus, a promising new app for research, some recent news, and I give you my choice for the best paid AI service, if I could only have one. Today's question is whether you should trust AI. Our question was provided by me, since I'm the number one listener of the podcast at the moment. So should you trust AI? And here I'm talking specifically about generative AI, but I think we could apply the thinking to AI more generally. Did that make sense? I hope so. So this is a really important question. Should you trust AI? And it's unfortunately an important question with the most aggravating answer of all, maybe. Or sometimes might be an even better answer. In some respects, should you trust AI is kind of a pointless question. If somebody asked me that, I would immediately say, trust for what? Whether you should trust really depends on the context in which you want to use generative AI. So, trust it for some things, but not for others. So how do you determine what those things are? Well, I think it comes down to two things: the capabilities of the AI model and the consequences of depending on faulty output. So if you look at the literature on trust, and I've done some research in this area, trust and trustworthiness, ability is a key aspect of trustworthiness. And ability varies by context. Look, if you want me to teach a class for you, I'm pretty trustworthy if it's within my realm of expertise. But you want me to fix your car? Nope. That is a bad idea. My first foray into fixing cars ended in spectacular and expensive failure, and I haven't really tried since then. So AI is good for some things. Generative AI is good for tasks involving language, like generating test questions or routine communication. It's really good at critiquing something you've written. One of my favorite prompts is, please critique this. It can be very good at summarizing documents and other forms of content, even YouTube videos. And I hate this word, but it's really good at ideation. It's excellent at helping you brainstorm ideas, although I tend to not use the ideas it comes up with, but when it comes up with ideas, it spurs other thoughts in my brain, and I usually end up on a good idea eventually. But AI is not so good at other things. It's really not great at tasks that involve nuanced, complex decision-making or deep understanding. It's not good at fact-checking recent events. It's not really great at tasks that require true human empathy or an understanding of nuanced contexts. And I could keep going for some time on its limitations. So the point here is that in order to accurately determine whether or not you should trust AI, you need to understand its capabilities and limitations in the context of whatever task you're trying to do. The second factor you need to consider are the consequences, or is the consequences, that sounds funny, of bad output. I kind of think about this the same way I think about Wikipedia. I use Wikipedia a lot. Matter of fact, I'm watching the Netflix series on Alexander the Great, and so I jumped on Wikipedia to learn a little bit more about that time in history. So what if Wikipedia is wrong about when Alexander the Great reigned? What difference does that make? Not much. But I don't depend on Wikipedia for my scholarship. I might go check a definition of something, but anything really important, I'm going to put more effort into it than just looking it up on Wikipedia. I treat generative AI, or I think about generative AI, the same way. If it's really important, I'm going to spend some time verifying what AI is telling me, or I might use AI to help me get started on something, but I'm not going to really rely on its output, at least not for anything that's really critical without doing a lot of checking first. So the bottom line here is you can trust generative AI for some things, but not for others. And when you do trust it, if it's an important task, verify. You want to be a skeptical user, especially until you fully understand generative AI's capabilities and limitations as they relate to the tasks you're trying to use it for. And remember, the more important the task, the more effort you should put into checking up on AI. All right, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about consensus. Consensus is an interesting an interesting custom GPT that was featured on OpenAI's GPT store page when it first rolled out. It was one of only 4, I think. Custom GPTs are, I don't want to say just, some of them are quite complicated. They are chatbots that are tailored for specific uses. And there are a bunch of them. There's a growing list. Some of them are really useful. Some of them are complete wastes, but they can be worth checking out. Consensus describes itself as your AI research assistant. Search 200 million academic papers from Consensus. Get science-based answers and draft content with accurate citations. That's a pretty big promise. I'm not sure Consensus fully lives up to that promise, but it does to an extent. When I was playing around with it, I found it great for getting a quick sense of the research in some area. So if you're just trying to get a quick handle on something, Consensus works pretty well. It's not a chatbot, though. It's an AI-fueled search engine that uses Semantic Scholar's database as its source material. And that is its strength and its weakness. Look, Semantic Scholar is great, and it's very extensive, but it does have its limitations. And if a paper's not included in Semantic Scholar, then it's not part of the training data for Consensus. And so that can be a problem. When I played around with it, my results were kind of mixed. It really wasn't great for a specific research area. So I tried using it for a research area where I've published some papers and I know the area fairly well. It's not that it came up with anything that was really wrong, but it left out some really important seminal papers in the area. So it's okay, but it's not great, and it's really not a substitute for doing the work that you need to do well-developed scholarship. I thought it was pretty good at something that was more practice-oriented. So again, it's almost like going back to the Wikipedia analogy, although I would trust Consensus a little bit more than I would trust Wikipedia for some things. Is it worth $7 a month? I think it's $6.99 a month if you pay annually. Maybe. I mean, I went ahead and paid for it because I think it has some uses, but I would certainly advise starting with the free tier to see if it's useful for you before you start shelling out your own money. So again, it's not bad. I think it's a step in the right direction, but I'm not so sure that it's quite there yet. You can check out Consensus in ChatGPT's GPT store. Not sure how it's a store yet. Or you can go directly to consensus.app. That's consensus.app. All right, let's talk about a couple of little news items that came out in the last couple of weeks. And the first one is the one that made a lot of splash, Arizona State University's partnership with OpenAI. You might have read about this. There'll be a link in the show notes, take you to an article on it. I'm not entirely clear what the partnership actually involves. The press releases talk about some vague language about giving ASU faculty and students access to the latest OpenAI models, but I don't know what that really means. And like a lot of these partnerships, I'm concerned that it might be a bunch of hype with few results of any real substance. Universities can be really enamored with this sort of thing. A lot of splash and then not much that comes out of it at the end. But I think it's a step in the right direction. My strong opinion is that higher ed needs to embrace AI, although caution is certainly warranted. I think AI is not just coming, it's here, and it's only going to increasingly affect higher ed. So I think it's a big mistake to just bury our collective heads in the sand and pretend that it's not happening. That's just not going to go anywhere. We need to help students and our colleagues in higher ed figure out how to use AI ethically and effectively. And maybe this partnership between OpenAI and ASU will help get us there. Time will tell. The other news item that I mentioned in the newsletter is Anthology's AI framework for higher education. I was not familiar with Anthology, but apparently they're an EdTech firm, and they recently released its AI policy framework. It's based on 7 principles: fairness, accountability, reliability, value alignment, humans in control, transparency and explainability, and privacy, security, and safety. It's pretty hard to argue with any of those. It's as good a list of principles as any. The framework seems reasonable, so does some of the advice that Anthology gives as part of its policy framework document. But I got to say, I'm largely skeptical of EdTech firms and the policy advice that they give out. They're in the business of making money, and I don't have any problem with that. But they are certainly not disinterested parties in all of this. So I would treat the framework as useful, but I'd be really careful about trusting everything that's in the document that describes the framework. So, your mileage may vary, maybe you feel differently, but I've been around enough consultants and EdTech firms to know that it's best to have a healthy sense of skepticism, although you certainly can leverage their knowledge, and I am not saying anything against consultants and EdTech firms, really. I don't think they have nefarious purposes, but they have their interests and we have ours, and sometimes they don't meet. I think that's enough on that topic, or maybe a little too much. I don't know. Okay, so for my last topic, I'm going to answer the question, if I could only have one paid generative AI service, what would it be? The surprise answer is not ChatGPT Pro, although I use ChatGPT Pro more than I use anything else in terms of generative AI. I generally like it a lot. I find it incredibly useful. But if I could only have one, it would be Poe, and you can go to poe.com. That's POE.com. Poe is really nice because it aggregates access to a lot of different chatbots. I think it was like 29 or 30 the last time I looked. Poe gives you access to a lot of useful models, including such models as DALL-E, ChatGPT 3.5, 3.5 Turbo, GPT-4, Claude, Llama, and the list goes on. You can check it out for yourself. It also gives you access to custom chatbots that are kind of like the custom GPTs that are created by other users. Some of those are decent, some are trash, but it's nice to have access to them. One of the things that really sells me on Poe is that it gives you access to Anthropic's Claude 2 100K model. This is a huge benefit because Claude 2 100K can handle much larger documents than GPT-4. The math isn't exact, but I think it can handle documents of up to around 75,000 words. That's a lot. So you can take a fairly long academic article, plug it into Claude 2 100,000K, 100K, and ask it to summarize or list out the main results or things like that. So it can be really, really useful in certain contexts. Another thing I like about Poe, and why I generally use it in my class, is that you just need an email address to sign up for the free version. You don't have to go through a lot. You don't have to provide a credit card. So if you just want to play with a lot of different models, Poe can be great. Now, the free version does not include access to all of the models that the paid version provides access to, for obvious reasons, but it's still pretty good to play around with some of those models. Another thing I like about Poe is because you have access to so many models, message limits may be less of a problem. ChatGPT 4 has some soft message limits. It varies from day to day, it seems. At one point, it was 40 messages every 3 hours. And I say it's a soft limit because I've only hit it once, but it was pretty irritating the one time I hit it. So having Claude having access to Claude and some of the other models through Poe can help you work around some of those limits when you do hit them. Microsoft Copilot is another solid free option, and Bard, Google's Bard, is getting better and better. But I still prefer Poe, even though I pay for it. I really think it's worth the $20 a month or whatever it is. But as a free service, it's hard to beat. Remember, all these models and all these interfaces into the models have their strengths and weaknesses. So I strongly recommend playing around with the free versions before you start shelling out your money, or your university's money. Well, that's it for this episode. Hopefully you got something of value out of it. If so, I'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe, like, follow, whatever it is on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss out on future episodes. I'd also appreciate it if you'd share this with your colleagues. The easiest way to do that is to send your colleagues to aigoestocollege.com. You can also subscribe to the newsletter by filling out the short form at aigoestocollege.com or by going to aigoestocollege.com/newsletter. If you have questions for me or issues you might want me to talk about, you can email me at craig@ethicalaiuse.com. That's craig@ethicalaiuse.com, or you can use the contact form at aigoestocollege.com. All right, that's it. I'll talk to you next time. Thanks. Thanks for listening to AI Goes to College. If you found this episode useful, you'll love the AI Goes to College newsletter. Each edition brings you useful tips, news, and insights that you can use to help you figure out what in the world is going on with generative AI and how it's affecting higher ed. Just go to aigoestocollege.com to sign up. I won't try to sell you anything, and I won't spam you or share your information with anybody else. As an incentive for subscribing, I'll send you the Getting Started with Generative AI guide. Even if you're an expert with AI, you'll find the guide useful for helping your less knowledgeable colleagues.